Welcome back, everyone. It's your girl, Tammy, aka the Cannabis Cutie, and we're here today to discuss more legal happenings in the cannabis industry. And I have with me.
Hi, guys. It's Meital Manzuri, managing partner for Manzuri Law for 20 attorneys. We advocate in the space and have been lawyers in the cannabis industry and now psychedelics for 15 plus years.
Woohoo. So let's get started. There is so much happening in the world of cannabis and law. Where do we even begin? We have Biden's administration discussing rescheduling or descheduling. We have one of the state's biggest distributors in California that just went under, affecting hundreds of brands. How do we even start this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting, the stuff that's happening federally, because I don't know. Also, just as like a student of the Controlled Substances Act and history and law, I know you are too.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see this happening in our lifetime. In a certain sense, we've been talking about, in a very real sense, we've been talking about rescheduling and descheduling the Controlled Substances Act since before I started practicing law, for sure.
Yeah.
And at my first internship ever, and working on the Ed Rosenthal case, we were talking about rescheduling and descheduling, and it seemed like pie in the sky then.
Yeah.
And it still sort of tends to feel like pie in the sky, even though we're getting closer. It's this weird kind of like, I don't want to get excited about it because I don't want to be disappointed.
I'm not going to get excited about it. If you even look back at the history of the Controlled Substances Act, cannabis was placed on Schedule 1, which says, no medical value and potential for abuse. It was temporarily placed on the CSA until doctors, the scientific community, could figure out where it should be placed. And instead of the scientific community getting to make that decision, it was made by law enforcement. And it's not in any scientific basis.
Yeah, and it's still the same, like, actors and villains. It's still the DEA, villain number one in the cannabis story. And for people who don't know, there are, schedules in the Controlled Substances Act, and each schedule means different things. So cannabis, psychedelics, those are both in Schedule 1, MDMA. That means no medical value and high potential for abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of goes down from there.
Yeah, Schedule 2 is interesting. You have medicines or drugs that they can make into medicine. So like cocaine, methamphetamines, those are going to be your Schedule 2 drugs, as well as medicines that they prescribe that are still very much lethal and that do have potential for abuse. Yeah, so these drugs that are on Schedule 2 that can absolutely kill you, they are lethal. They're legal because they are being used in a pharmacological.
Like fentanyl, Adderall.
Yes,
cocaine.
Fentanyl is Schedule 2 in cannabis, which has no way of killing you unless you're working in facilities that are not taking proper precaution to keep you safe. Directly, though, there's no receptors in your brainstem to do what fentanyl and what other opiates do, which is depress the brainstem. And the brainstem is very important because those are automated activities. So blinking, breathing. Once you make that go to sleep, you're not going to automatically do these processes, which is why opioids can be so dangerous.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's no receptors for cannabinoids there.
It's so interesting about the history, too, because essentially psychedelics and cannabis contribute to the evolution of the human brain, right? Our growth in certain ways could very much be impacted by the use of cannabis and psychedelics. And after, 50, 60 years of the war on drugs, we've seen a considerable mental health crisis, especially in this country. And I don't know that the two are unrelated.
I agree with you there. I mean, we took it, even just consuming hemp in general, out of our diets 80, 90 years ago. And now we're also seeing like all these crazy autoimmune disorders. And I would like to believe that there's some kind of relation there as well. Of course, we have to look at the science and the data, but this, bureaucratic control and just this intentional attack on cannabis has implicated us in so many levels. And I don't have any faith that, especially the Biden administration, is going to do anything about rescheduling or descheduling. I think it's just another, let's talk about this, and nothing actually happens the way that it always works out.
Well, here's what I think could happen. So right now, the Biden administration has asked the HHS to look into the scheduling of cannabis, which the HHS is, and the Attorney General, who is Xavier Becerra, who was the Attorney General for California.
Mm-hmm.
So he is pro-cannabis.
Right.
He's even like tweeted things at 420.
Okay.
On purpose. Like
okay.
he's our inside guy.
All right.
And so he has directed the HHS through the FDA, so it's like it's your like agency soup here.
Yeah.
To do the medical and scientific studies. And Xavier Becerra is saying that we're going to have an indication from HHS by the end of the year.
Right.
Which is super exciting. So if HHS, see, I'm getting excited.
Yeah.
If the HHS, essentially recommends descheduling, rescheduling, or status quo, that could become the law.
Okay. I'm curious to see what are they going to use to analyze this, because the government has conducted plenty of studies. We have the LaGuardia report, we have the Schaefer Commission, just two of those that extensively says this is actually pretty benign in terms of the harms when you look at the benefits. And again, our government likes to throw this stuff down the memory hole and pretend like it never happened. We have the Indian Hemp Commission in India. Canada had their own version. The UK has their own version.
Right.
What are we going to use to assess? And, it's all the same information. The information is still going to be what it was in the past as it is today. And in fact, I would say we've learned more. So now what basis of science or information are we going to use to make this decision? That's where I'm a skeptic.
Okay, so there's 8 factors.
Okay.
Its actual or relative potential for abuse, scientific evidence of its pharmacological effect, if known, the state of current scientific knowledge regarding the drug or other substance, its history and current pattern of abuse, the scope, duration, and significance of abuse, what, if any, risk there is to public health, its psychic or psychological dependence liability, and whether the substance is an immediate precursor of a substance already controlled under the subject.
Okay, so if we're going to use those as the basis to determine if this should be legal or not, then it should be legal, and we can break it down one by one. Okay. There are synthetic cannabinoids already being sold by Big Pharma, Epidiolex and Marinol being 2 of them. Marinol would be the THC version, Epidiolex would be the CBD version, and I believe Marinol is just like synthetic THC with like sesame oil or something like that. So, and then as far as what was the second one that you said?
The second one, scientific. Okay, so first is its actual or relative potential for abuse.
Okay, so potential for abuse. I think it's just as abusive as like chocolate and coffee.
Right.
It's not as abusive as tobacco and alcohol, which are 2 legal substances.
Check. Okay. Number 2, scientific evidence of its pharmacological effect, if known.
We have Marinol and Epidiolex that are both FDA approved and currently being sold, that are synthetic versions of the plant that already exists.
And we have research studies that show out of UC San Diego that it's great for pain management. That's some of our strongest evidence is the pain management studies that have been done. And I wonder to what extent they take like anecdotal or like, I would hope that they would, but maybe not.
There's the endocannabinoid system as well, that, a system of neurotransmitters in our body that work directly with this plant. So that right there is scientific evidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The state of current scientific knowledge regarding the drug or other substance.
Again, the Schaefer report and the LaGuardia Commission both have really good United States research that can talk about this. And then all the research that we've learned about CBD and how it helps stop seizures in their tracks. We can just Charlotte Figge's story.
Right. But CBD is already not
quasi-legal.
Yeah, it's quasi-legal. But yes, I mean, it's all building on each other, right? Yeah. So then the other thing I would add to that is that, kind of overall, as far as how much knowledge or science we have, 1996, 26 years of medical cannabis in California, and then the domino of states, and we haven't seen anything actually bad happen. And we've seen actually decreases in opioids. We've seen
and harder street drugs.
There's no indication that there's an increase in adolescence use of cannabis. So we have all this kind of like time study. The thing that gives me pause is the FDA is doing the study. Okay. And the FDA is the one that did the CBD study. Okay. Which basically found it to be like unsafe.
Yeah. But they didn't find Tylenol to be unsafe. I don't understand it. I could take 8 CBDs and I won't die. But if I take 8 Tylenol, I might die. Like, that's the crazy part. And then we had the compassionate IND investigational new drug program in the United States that was for cannabis. And our federal government had to prescribe cannabis cigarettes to the patients that were approved through this compassionate IND. So we even have that research in the government grown cannabis at Ole Miss. So what are we looking at?
So what's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the holdup? Risk to public health. We kind of already dispelled that. Scope, duration, and significance of abuse.
You know, again, I think it's one of those things like coffee, chocolate, like, and also we have to understand that people are going to chase intoxication. So what about those people who are constantly driving fast cars, motorcycles, skydiving? Are we going to make their activities illegal because they all are also chasing a different state of consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a fundamental sort of belief or ideology that we should be allowed to do with our bodies what we want, right? And I think that's the fundamental issue, is that the government wants to control us.
They want to save us from ourselves, but like, don't attack me for my vegetable use.
Or save the children. The to go back on psychedelics, what's really pushing that movement is the veteran improvement and the proof of veteran benefits. And so I think, when you're fast tracking these drugs, it's really, we have to continue to show the medical benefits. I think that's really important. Yeah. But the significance of abuse, I think, we need to have a real discussion too about, time, place, and manner of cannabis use, all that kind of stuff. I think as advocates, we are so pro that that's okay. We also need education, harm reduction, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. Which I don't know. Do you think the cannabis community has done much in harm reduction or education or?
From my perspective, I feel there's a lot of advocates that are fighting for education. And then harm reduction, I think the state has done some with, testing, making sure that you have safe, clean cannabis. But no, I honestly don't think that we have enough conversations about abuse or how to, maybe go about it in a healthy way. I do advocate for intentional consumption because especially you see on the internet, we have advocates and educators, and then you have entertainers in cannabis. And they're 2 different categories. One is like smoking weed as much as they can. And they're kind of showing the efficacy that they can take as much of this to the head and still be safe. And then you have those that are advocating for change and spreading information. I think both are important, but I do think that maybe on the entertainment side, it is kind of, giving the prohibitionists, like, look at this person who's just taking bong rip after bong rip after bong rip and being very irresponsible. So I do think that we as a community could do better with speaking about intentional use, or maybe explaining why we consume so much that we do.
Yeah. And also just because I came back from that conference, the psychedelic science conference, it's all in my brain, that movement is very heavily influenced by PhD, MD, all these other credentials. Yeah. And they are very much talking about intentional use. And I do like that. Yeah. I think it's an important part of the topic, but we diverted from our talk. Hold on. Yeah. We're still on our thing. Okay. So psychic or physiological dependence liabilities. Okay. So this is the harm reduction stuff too. Yeah. Like, is it physically or psychologically addictive?
I think anything can be psychologically addictive. I mean, even people who eat to numb their feelings, those are not the substances itself as much as it is the trauma that the person is dealing with. Why are you eating so much to numb yourself? True. Why are you consuming so much to numb? Why are you drinking so much to numb? Why are you working out so much to avoid your problems? And I think that goes to the greater look of the trauma that somebody is dealing with. The substance is never the issue. It's almost always the side effect.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Absolutely. Whether the substance is an immediate precursor of a substance already controlled under this subchapter. I don't even know what that
They're
means.
saying it's a gateway drug. They want to
evaluate
language? And see if gateway it's a gateway language? Drug. But again, when we legalize, we see that people's prescription use goes down. Heroin use, all kind of negative drugs that are out on the streets that really can affect your life. That usage goes down. So I think we've already debunked that cannabis is not a gateway drug. And as somebody who has been consuming for 15 years now, I still have no desire to go try some smack. Like there's no desire at all. I want to keep it at weed, and I've actually stopped drinking as a result of my cannabis use.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I think there are people that they're going on a bender because they're going on a bender, right? Yeah. Like so they might be using all these other substances along with cannabis, but there's no, like, in my opinion, there's no causation.
Right.
And there are people that are, inherently more addictive in personality or nature. And so, as far as like harm reduction goes, I think we have to be, like you said, very responsible about our messaging and intentional use. Yeah. And being, promoting kind of this mass intoxication or use could be harmful, but there are people that can use a ton of cannabis and not feel it. Like I've never done a dab.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid to because I just don't feel like I could handle it. Yeah. But there are some people that,
they have chronic pain or chronic stress, and it's beneficial. And I mean, when you look at America, we're guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Oh, yes.
If drugs is in the pursuit of somebody's happiness, that is not my business.
Yeah.
They're not hurting me. They're not hurting anybody else but themselves. That's their choice. So in Dr. Carl Hart, really in his book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, he talks about that, majority of successful people who are paying their bills, paying their taxes, being good citizens, also use drugs in a very responsible way. And in fact, crack is a upper middle class drug now. And that's not stuff that you're going to see on the news, but crack is a cheaper version of cocaine, and it is definitely no longer a poor man's drug. So I think we have to respect that, even though we don't agree with it, maybe morally, it is a person's right to decide if, hey, you know what, I've had a really hard month at the law firm in litigating, and I want to do heroin this weekend, and that's their business.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a great big discussion, but I wanted to also talk about this other little wrinkle in the so we talked about kind of like who makes the decision, and there's the option to reschedule, which would mean you move it lower down.
Yes.
Keep it the same as Schedule 1, nothing changes, or just deschedule it.
Yeah.
So most advocates want to deschedule.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So what happens is the HHS are going to make the recommendation, and then the DEA can basically initiate an action under the Administrative Procedures Act where they basically challenge this decision.
Yeah.
And that's where we get into a difficult place.
Yeah, the DEA is not going to relent. That's, if you look at the history, they even had a young their administrative law judge, Francis L. Young, who said, hey, we've been going about this all wrong. We need to deschedule it, stop arresting people. It's actually pretty healthy, and let's focus our efforts on things that matter.
Yeah.
And his boss was like, I can't believe you just said this. We're not backing this up. And now we have to explain why cannabis can't be legal. And their response was, it's illegal because the law says it should be illegal. And it worked. That was able to go and rebuttal all of the facts that he brought forth about how it helps children with cancer, how doctors and nurses are testifying, how it's helping children with cancer on their wards. But the DEA does not care. I do not seeing them relenting at all. And I think that they have the strongest pull in all of this.
Well, as an agency, under the law, they get deference. Mm-hmm. Extreme deference by the law. So they have a lot of discretion to make the rules that they want to make. So even if HHS and Attorney General say, okay, this should be descheduled, mm-hmm. the DEA could initiate its own process. Correct. To override this decision, adjust the decision, etc., and then make its own ruling, mm-hmm. which would only be challengeable in court, mm-hmm. which we've tried many times throughout our history and have always lost. Yeah. Because of the deference that the DEA gets.
Yeah, for sure. It's pretty crazy. All in all, I don't see it happening. I'd love to see a deschedule. A reschedule would be a nightmare because once it's rescheduled, now the FDA has jurisdiction, and right. everything that we've done since cannabis has been legalized is now permanently halted until the FDA approves individual medicines. So that's what I'm nervous about.
Yeah. And the DEA, so what I think is interesting, they've found that cannabis has a high potential for abuse because, number one, cannabis is the most widely used illicit substance in the U.S. Number two, preclinical and clinical data shows that it has reinforcing effects of drug abuse. 3, national databases on actual abuse show that it is the most widely abused drug. And that cannabis seizures show wide availability and trafficking. And it's like, well, duh.
It's illegal.
Well, duh. If it's the most widely used substance and it's no one's reported death, no one's reported
right
any real issues. I mean, obviously there's harm reduction issues, but
yeah. Well, I mean, the United States government needs to also look at harm reduction because if you look at the Dutch, they said, our people are going to continue to use this. We can either A, keep attacking them and try to stop them, or we can B, realize that this is something that they're going to do and try to regulate it the best that we can and keep it in one area. And that's what the Dutch did. That's what they still do. It's the famous red light district. They have no issues.
Well, it's interesting because when I was after law school, I went and worked in The Hague in the Netherlands, and I also lived in Amsterdam for a year, which was super fun. But it was interesting to see. So like the coffee shops in the red light district, that's very much a part of the tourist community. And the actual, native Dutch people, they are, kind of, grow out of it almost. It's interesting because they've had access to it for so long. They've kind of
gone.
Yeah, it's not like, let's go to the coffee shop every day. I mean, there are people that do that and there are people that do not. But just having it prohibited and all the rules about distribution and access, it creates this own allure, of the taboo. And that I think that just coincides so much with American culture too, right? Yeah. In European countries, people are giving their kids a glass of wine, no big deal. Mm-hmm. And we still haven't even been able to figure that part out when it comes to alcohol.
Yeah. We have a lot of overreach, definitely a lot of overreach. I think that, we've been doing this fight for so long and it's been detrimental to Americans and to society, and we've wasted billions and we're still in the same place that we were when we first started. So at what point do you say, okay, this is no longer working, we need to have a different solution?
Well, it sounds like Biden is saying that, and hopefully our boy Xavier is gonna push it through and then the DEA, that's where I really do think that HHS and, the together with FDA and the Attorney General are going to make some move on cannabis. I agree that rescheduling would be a
nightmare. Leave it as it is or deschedule.
Yeah. They could also reschedule and then Congress could then they could make an amendment to decriminalize.
Okay.
So I'm kind of into that too. Like if you reschedule, decriminalize.
Yeah.
Obviously prefer the deschedule.
I'm just nervous because if you look back at the history, we had over 30 states that had medical cannabis programs through the Compassionate IND program. And as soon as the Reagans came into office, that is when 100% of it started getting attacked. And then by the time HW became president, it was closed. They were like, absolutely not, because cannabis was really being proven to be used as a medicine because of the AIDS epidemic. And once they saw that this was helping, HW was like, nope, close the program. Nobody else is getting approved for this, because they had people with AIDS getting approved through this Compassionate Investigational New Drugs program.
So you say if Biden's not reelected, no matter whatever happens this year could be like flipped?
I think that we might repeat history and get rid of all of the progress that we made in cannabis, and we'll have to start back over. And that start back over was Prop 215 with Dennis Perone fighting. And I'm just very nervous that it could be Biden, because it doesn't matter if the president is blue or red. They are equally as bad when it comes to the war on drugs. I would say blue presidents have a tendency to be worse because they don't want to be seen as soft on crime. And Biden had a son that was addicted to drugs. I'm just not hopeful. And then, whoever comes after, I know Governor Ron DeSantis already said when he comes in, like, we're getting rid of this. So I'm a bit kind of like, are we going to do the same thing that we did back in the 80s? We'll see.
Gotcha. TBD. Was there anything else about the rescheduling?
I think that we covered that.
I agree.
Yeah. What about Herbal? Ooh. Yes. Okay. So one of the biggest distributors in California for cannabis.
And nationally too.
Nationally just collapsed. And honestly, the only reason why we have distributors the way that we do is because of the laws. So Herbal collapsing is a really big deal, but I think it also points the finger at how really terrible the system is working.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a symptom of a bigger problem. It signaled a big wave through the community and the industry. I think we've seen a few dominoes falling, and everybody's on high alert. Herbal essentially had a line of credit or a loan with East West Bank, and East West Bank called the loan or refused to extend the line of credit and essentially put the business into receivership. Okay. Which makes the receiver, who's a neutral party, essentially like mommy. Okay. Managing everybody's bills and assets and operations. And deciding what they're going to do. So it's essentially like a takeover by a neutral third party of the business and of the operations to better manage the assets and the bills. Apparently, Herbal had millions and millions of dollars in accounts receivable, so they didn't collect. I think it was $7 million or something. Okay. And so...
And when you say collect, is that from the retailers?
That's from the retailers. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's from the retailers, which goes down the supply chain. Yeah. So as the distributors, getting paid, and then the distributors paying the manufacturer and maybe another distributor and the cultivator. So if the distributor doesn't collect, we've seen a lot of people in this industry, I won't name names, that are having these issues. And if they don't collect from the retailers, then they can't pay everybody else. Correct. So it's felt all the way down the supply chain. And that's happening across the industry.
Right. It's not just Herbal.
Yeah, it's not just Herbal. And I'm not sure, the retailers are getting the biggest squeeze on the tax side. And so I think they just can't pay their bills. And they also have businesses to run, and they want to expand and they want to grow. So net terms, okay, I'll pay you in 30 days, turns into, 60 days, and then 90 days. And then once, and then you're 6 months overdue, and it's really hard to collect. So that's the situation they're in. And then essentially the receivership will pay out whoever's kind of first in line, the debt. Oh. So a lot of these vendors will not get paid out. They will not see a dime. They will not get paid out. It's mostly East West Bank that will get paid.
So was when East West decided to get a receivership, was that their decision?
It's a court decision. Okay. So you go to court and you say, hey, this business has defaulted in XYZ ways, and we want a receivership. Okay. So then was the neutral third party that came in, do they know anything about the cannabis industry? The court documents, are all we have right now. And so I don't have that information yet, but we'll be watching it for sure. Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah, because I mean, I can imagine they'll come in and probably want to sell off as much as they can to try to recoup as much money as they can. But like, what about the licenses? Because you can't just sell licenses in the state of California. That's not how it works.
Yeah, they could be acquired. They could sell to a bigger company, right? Like another cannabis company could essentially buy their company out. But when you buy another company, you also buy all their debt.
Yes.
So it's going to be really hard to sell.
And there's a lot of regulatory agencies to even get that transfer to another cannabis company.
Yeah, that's what we deal with every day, are the regulatory agencies and the changing of ownership. And it's, it's this bureaucracy that you have to get through. There's all these regulations and limitations, and it's possible. You just have to do it in a structured way.
Mm-hmm. Gosh. So basically what we're going to see is a shit show, for lack of a better words. But do you think this will in turn potentially change how the market works and the laws? Because this is proof right here that our system is failing. Prop 64 should have never passed. RIP to Dennis Perone, who was screaming that. But this law has pretty much hampered everyone. And I don't see too many success stories in California.
It's real tough out there right now. It's real tough out there right now. And people, it's a squeeze. It's like a contraction, and we're certainly feeling that squeeze. And what's going to happen, I am not sure. I always go back to interstate commerce. Yes. Which is, really interesting. And we've talked about it before. And actually the California DCC has asked the California Attorney General to basically make an opinion as to whether interstate commerce is legal, and then to ask for the DOJ for approval. So that's another long process towards federalism. Okay. But California is really feeling the squeeze, and I don't know what's going to happen. Most people are leaving, consolidating, leaning out. Some would argue that it's like a correction, right, from a Wild West industry that got saturated, and those businesses that are super successful will expand and grow and succeed, and there are businesses that are doing that. I think a lot of these failures that we hear about, or not failures, but just winding up, or the business isn't working out, is companies that try to grow really, really fast and got funding, then got out over leveraged, right? And they just couldn't keep up. And I think I know a lot of really smart business people who are operating really, really lean right now and focusing on the core priorities and core objectives, and they are going to succeed. Okay. It's, everyone came into this as a gold rush. Yes. And it was a gold rush for a while. Yeah. In California.
64 passed and they said, we want to get all the gold now, the government.
Right. And I understand why people say Prop 64 was the worst thing to happen. From my perspective, having worked in criminal defense and defending people in state and federal court for crimes associated with cannabis, Prop 64 did decriminalize it. And so our criminal defense practice as far as cannabis goes is very, very small. And I'm very, very happy about that because that's what Prop 64 did. So on the business side, major squeeze. Yeah. Impossible to succeed, 280E, all of those issues really just set everyone up for failure. So yes, doing it medically or outside the legal market was beneficial in many, many ways as far as, running a business, but then you get caught in a case and it ruins your life.
Yeah, very much so. I won't say that 64 was all bad. There were good things, but I don't believe that the good that was added weighed, because if Prop 64 was going to prevent people's lives from being ruined, well, these business owners who did well in 215 still had their lives ruined under 64, even if it wasn't their freedom. It was everything else that they had done for the last few decades.
Yes, I hear you on that. I do hear you on that. They also made a lot of money. Yeah. They also made a lot of money. But yes, I definitely hear you on that. And then there's another argument that kind of goes with what you're saying, which is under 215 in medical, the criminal side, the enforcement side was getting way more lax, even without legalization. Right. So there's an argument that, it still wouldn't have been such a big deal in California. Yeah. Or maybe the next year, a different, better version of the law would have passed. But yeah, this is where we're at. Yeah. And it was really interesting when I was at the psychedelics conference because there was so many comparisons between cannabis and psychedelics. The intersection was really interesting in talking about how to build, what lessons you would have learned from cannabis and even saying that cannabis legalization has been a failure. Yeah. Which is tough to hear. It's tough, but I would say, yeah, are we better off? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Well, that's what's happening in the world of weed so much. We've got really big issues that are being decided upon in Washington. And we also have a lot of things happening on the state level. And of course, across the nation, there are fights with cannabis going on in the state level. We'll always do our best to try to keep you updated and start the conversations. And right now, we're just going to hope and pray that things are going to go in a really good direction. But as history has shown, you never know when it comes to this devil's lettuce. That's right. I think, the CSA just really is the original sin. Yeah. And we're trying to recover from that. And it's going to take us a very long time to recover from that. Yeah. Both legally, social justice reform, business-wise, research, science. We're working against a very, very difficult framework. And then, I also like to bring the Zoom lens out a little bit and talk about the international side of it, right? So the UN, treaty against drugs concurrently with the CSA is a whole nother hurdle and issue. Another gift by Harry J. Anslinger. Yeah. Yeah. So we got a lot of work ahead of us and, we'll see where it goes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's all we got. Thanks for joining us and we'll see you at the next one. It's been great. I'm your girl, Tammy, aka the Cannabis Cutie. And I'm Meital Manzari from 420 Attorneys. Peace. Yay. Bye. Bye.